Before we begin our Midrash, we need to acknowledge Devarim 8, verse 10, which says, "So eat and be satisfied, and bless Adonai God for the good land He has given you." So let's do that. We have eaten and we are satisfied. We thank you for the land. It's in Yeshua's name. Amen. So this is the Midrash for Torah portion Acharei Mot, chapter 16, verse 1 to 18, verse 30. So basically 3 chapters of the Torah. This is what we read today. And the Midrash today is really only going to cover chapter 16. So the first 3 aliyot is what we're really covering in the Midrash today, just chapter 16. Here was the first verse of the portion, including the words Acharei Mot, which are the, 1, 2, 3-4, then 5 and 6 are the words of the title of the portion, Acharei Mot. And so, according to the judicial counting, there are 28 mitzvot in this portion. And I'm looking at the FFOZ, First of Zion handout. The text was just too small to put it on a slide. So for those at home, this is taken from First of Zion, Depths of the Torah for Acharei Mot, Volume 5. It's pages 841 and 842 is where you find the mitzvah list. And as we're talking before the Midrash, most of these mitzvot are negative mitzvot. There only are a couple of them, and the positive ones we see here, positive ones are mostly for those things that can't be done at the time. There's, for example, to perform the Yom Kippur service, and as FFOZ says here, it applies to the high priest and the priesthood with the temple and Levitical system in place. So that mitzvah can't be done today. The other one though can be, which is as positive number 147, to cover the blood of the slaughtered animal. That can be done, and their application is to apply to Jewish people and God-fearing Gentile believers in every place and time. So that is a mitzvah that still could be done today. But the other one, and the negative ones are, you're basically keeping them by not doing these sexual sins here, to be intimate with one's kinswoman, father, mother, with the wife of one's father, with your sister, the daughter of your son, the daughter of your daughter, with your stepsister, to one's paternal aunt or maternal aunt, paternal for the wife of your paternal uncle, with your uncle, with your wife's son, the wife of one of your sons, the wife of one of your brothers, both a woman and her daughter, a woman and her son's daughter, a woman and her daughter's daughter, a woman and her sister while the woman is still alive, a woman in her menstrual state. So those things can be done by not committing those sexual sins. To offer any children to Moloch, that can be observed by not doing that today, and to not be intimate with anyone of the same gender, nor an animal, um, for both a man or a woman. So those negative mitzvot are ones that can be kept in every place and time. Uh, those are taken really primarily from chapter 18 here, but there are a couple of them from chapter 17, and a couple of the mitzvot are listed here from chapter 16, the ones involving the Yom Kippur service. And the first one listed here is from 16 verse 2. It says, the high priest is not to enter the Holy of Holies except at the prescribed time, which is for the Yom Kippur service. So the negative part of that mitzvah can be done. It is being done today because there's not an altar or a temple in place. The Levitical system is not in place as well. So the high priest is not entering the Holy of Holies at the non-prescribed time. So that's keeping that negative mitzvah don't do mitzvah. But the positive side of that, to enter at the prescribed time, can't be done because there's not a not a temple or an altar in place to do that. And the Holy of Holies is not in place at this point in time. So questions on the mitzvah list that we just looked at? So this is one of the rare portions, perhaps, where the vast majority of these are negative mitzvot, and that, in fact, everyone can do them. I mean, or everyone can not do them and keep the mitzvah. So, looking at chapter 16, first of all, what are the instructions concerning atonement, and do they still apply? And are they difficult to follow in the exile and without a tabernacle or temple in place? So we'll take a look at some of that. Before we start, though, further questions. What is the name of the service, the Yom Kippur service, and Yom HaKippurim? Significance of the garments. Who or what is Azazel? And what does atonement really mean? Are one's sins just covered up, or is Israel cleansed from the sins according to the Torah? Before we can get answering, still more questions. What day does the service occur? Is this service a temporary instruction or an everlasting statute? What does it mean to afflict your soul or afflict your nefesh, your beings? And which sins in particular are cleansed on Yom Kippur? That's some of the questions that we can take a look at today. In chapter 16, verse 7, it says to take the two goats and set them before Yehevave at the door of the tent of meeting. The passage here, I guess, doubles down on, at least in the Aramaic text, the Peshitta text of the Tanakh, says to set them alive before Yah, which I think is actually implied in the Hebrew text of this as well. Take the two goats and set them before Yehevave at the door of the tent meeting. It's implied that they're both alive at that point, but that that's confirmed by what the Peshitta says. We read it also in the Talmud that they are presented together here at the altar, both alive at the same point in time. There's not, I mean, the Peshitta having the word alive in there is not attested to in the Masoretic text, but there's not a surviving Dead Sea Scrolls to look at to see if that was the word alive is actually in in a different Hebrew text besides the Masoretic text that we currently have. But it seemed like it makes sense to have them both alive at the same point in time. The next verse, Aaron shall cast lot for the two goats, which on New American Standard translates one lot for the Lord and the other lot for the scapegoat. A lot of translations leave it simply untranslated, just transliterated in the text. And usually that looks something like this, Azazel. Daniel Gregg makes an argument based on grammar that Azazel is a compound word that should be separated. The vowel points restored to their common Hebrew meaning, Ez and Ozel, from the word Azal. The first word means goat. We actually talked about that in our in the fun challenged. Ez is goat, as Azim was the answer to the fun challenge question, plural. And the second means going away. Ozel means going away or departing. So the sense of the two words is goat departing or goat going away. Continuing that thought from linguistics is that goat going away is a male goat, and it's essentially that it actually is meaningful Hebrew words, and it'd be Ez Ozel if it was if the vowel points were restored to that, and the idea that you're leaving one of the goats to Yah and the other one to a desert goat demon, or in some ideas a prince of evil spirits, would be, if you look at the underlying Hebrew text of it, it makes sense that scapegoat is a better understanding of that. And this is how a lot of translations read, but a lot of them, just as we said, read just basically transliterating the text as Azazel. And so leaving it as Azazel kind of indicates that it doesn't mean a goat going away, but is another type of a goat demon. So the ones that read as in scapegoat, that type, are the NIV, New American Standard, King James 2000, Webster's, the World English Bible, the Young's literal translation, and the Septuagint. Those that don't read that way are shown on the screen, and even some ones that many of us use. For example, the Complete Jewish Bible and the ISR Scriptures both read as Azazel instead of as a translation of the word as goat going away or scapegoat, how the New American Standard reads. A tradition of the Second Temple period was that the goat was being thrown over a cliff to effect atonement. We didn't see that in the Torah. It doesn't say it doesn't include that in there now. But there is a potential cliff connection with Yeshua in that, in terms of the tradition. You might recall from the Gospel of Luke, there's a passage that reads, "And all the people in the synagogue were filled with rage as they heard these things, and they got up and drove him out of the city and led him to the brow of the hill in which their city had been built, in order to throw him down the cliff." So, based on the cliff connection, this may have taken place on or about Yom Kippur, as Yeshua, I think, would be representation of both the sin offering in the temple, but also the taking away the sins of Israel into the wilderness, as he was the taker of sins away from the children of Israel.
As well as being the sacrifice for the sins.
Yes. So we said that in Torah, the goat going away kind of reminds me of the tradition of tashlik. The tashlik on Rosh Hashanah is basically throwing bread into the water. And when you throw the bread into the water, you're essentially, it's like taking your sins as the bread and throwing them into the water and take it away from you. And the same idea of throwing the goat over the cliff. You don't want the goat coming to, the goat with all the sins put on it to come wandering out of the wilderness and come wandering back into your camp. And it's the same way you don't want the bread if you're in the tradition way of tashlik, the bread coming back to your shoreline. You want it to be taken far away from you. So there's the goat going away idea. Really the throwing over the cliff idea, I think, could come back from, or could be similar to the Rosh Hashanah tradition of not wanting that bread to come back to you to the shoreline in the same sort of manner. The next is taken from Tractate Yoma of the Talmud, which reads, it's from Yoma 39b. Our rabbis taught, during the last 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the lot for the Lord did not come up in the right hand, nor did the crimson-colored strap become white, nor did the westernmost light shine, and the doors of the temple, hell, would open by themselves. And so, some commentary on that. I mean, this is taken directly from the Talmud. So when something, we'll talk about this in a little more detail in a second. But looking at a text that presents something that isn't favorable for your cause, but if it's something that is unfavorable from sometimes a hostile source, it underscores the reliability of it, because if it wasn't true, why would it be published? And so the particular thing on here, the strap, the crimson colored strap, is talking about here. Crimson colored strap was one was tied to the goat going away, and the other was tied to the temple door. And what was said was that when the goat going over the cliff was thrown over the cliff, that the strap that was once crimson became white, the one that is tied to the temple door. But in the 40 years prior to destruction of the temple, that never happened. And again, that Yeshua connection could be looking at, because it was about 40 years after the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection, that the temple was destroyed. So basically, a generation later, after Yeshua was executed, that crimson-colored strap never became white again. And the idea was, or at least the thought was, that the strap turning white indicated that Israel's sins had been atoned for and taken away. So here's a commentary, if you will, on the subject this is taken from Talmudic Evidence for Messiah at 30 CE by Nicholas Fedorov. And the four signs, I'll go back for one slide. The four signs were shown here. The lot coming up in the right hand for the one for the Lord, The crimson close strap became white, the westernmost light shining, and the doors of the temple staying closed. So here's what it says. The first of these signs or miracles concerns a random choosing of the lot, which was cast on Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim, Day of Atonement. The lot chosen determined which of the two goats would be for the Lord, and which goat would be the scapegoat. During the 200 years before approximately 30 of the Common Era, when the high priest picked one of the two stones, each year the priest would select a black stone as often as a white stone. But for the 40 years approximately before the temple was destroyed, the high priest always picked the black stone. And the odds of this happening are 2 to the 40th power, which are pretty small, 1 in about 5.5 billion. The lot for the scapegoat, or the black stone, contrary to all the laws of chance, came up 40 times in a row from 30 to 70. This was considered a dire event and indicated something very significant. The second miracle is one I've talked on briefly. It says, the second miracle concerns a crimson strip or cloth that is tied to the scapegoat. A portion of this crimson or red cloth was also removed and the goat from that goat and tied to the temple door. Each year, the red cloth on the temple door turned white, as if to signify the atonement of another Yom Kippur was acceptable to Yah. The annual event happened until the year 30, when the cloth then remained crimson each year to the time of the temple's destruction. And that's I think, the most interesting of these 4 miracles, or 4 signs rather, because the timing of it, as Yeshua's death indicates, that it kind of indicates that they're no longer acceptable. Their offering was no longer acceptable. Not that the Yom Kippur offering had been done away with, but rather that their offering was not acceptable because of their condemnation, in my view, of the true Yom Kippur sacrifice for the sins of Israel. And that they had rejected that true sacrifice, that true drawing near, in order to pursue their own wealth, their own gain, and not being true leaders. Pretty much the kind of leaders we read about today in the Haftorah portion in Ezekiel chapter 22. The leadership was corrupt, and the priesthood was corrupt. The third miracle was that the most important lamp of the 7-candlestick menorah in the temple went out and would not shine. Every night for 40 years, approximately over 1,250 nights in a row, the main lamp of the menorah went out of its own accord, no matter what the attempts and precautions the priests took to safeguard against this evil. So if the shamash of the menorah goes out, the middle light goes out every night for 40 years in a row, that seems like it would be a pretty, a foreshadowing of something pretty bad if that's happening. I mean, think about the temple menorah, the central light going out every night for 40 years. Wow.
That's a lot of nights.
That's a lot of nights. Again, I didn't do any math on this, but the chance of that happening every night, it's got to be, as a random percentage, it's got to be
40 times 365.
Pretty astronomical. The fourth miracle was that, or the fourth sign rather, I would say, was that the temple doors swung open every night of their own accord. And this occurred every night for approximately 40 years before the temple was destroyed. The Jerusalem Talmud states, said Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai to the temple, "O temple, why do you frighten us? We know that you will end up destroyed, for it has been said, open your doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour your cedars." So that's the 4 signs. Again, the text is coming from typically it would be considered to be a hostile source to Yeshua's messiahship, and so it would seem that it would be quite, there is a truth in this, because otherwise it would not have been reported, because it could seem to be negative for those who didn't believe that Yeshua was the Messiah. To point this out, that happened 40 years before the temple was destroyed, and which approximates the time of Yeshua's execution. So the Yom Kippur service is it's one chapter in the Torah. It's also a complete tractate in the Mishnah that describes in detail how it was done in the Second Temple period. So one of the chapters, Yoma 5, one of the tractates here, details how, not really chapter, but the section, Yoma 5, 5a and 5b. Yoma 5 details how the high priest took the fire pan or censer from the set-apart place and put it into the set-apart place and piled up the incense so that the whole house was filled with smoke. So this is kind of like an SOP, standard operating procedure, or this is how it was done. Then he went out of the most holy place and retrieved the blood of the already slaughtered bullock and brought it back into the most holy place and sprinkled the blood. So if you go back to what this is already slaughtered, so you had to have, the sequence of events has to start here kind of with the slaughter of the bull. Then and only then because you have to have the blood already you go into the most holy place and sprinkle the blood. So then, leaving the most holy place, you set the bull's blood down, and then you go for that goat blood from the goat for Yah, not the Ozel goat. So the goat has to also be slaughtered before, really, if you go back and say here, before the high priest goes in with the incense. So you had the bull's blood, then you have the goat blood being brought in, and then he sets the goat's blood down, repeats the process with the bulls, then he empties the blood of the bull into the blood of the goat and pour the contents of the full basin onto the empty one. So this ceremony here of mixing the blood of bulls and goats, it doesn't appear directly that way in the Torah, but it does appear that way in the explanation for the service we see in the book of Hebrews. So the book of Hebrews is a second witness to the practice of mixing the blood of bulls and goats together. Then the high priest used this blood to purify the whole altar by sprinkling and pouring the remaining blood on the western base of the outer altar, finally pouring the residue upon the southern base of the outer altar. So overall, when you look at the service, according to the service we're going to look at here in a second here, that the high priest goes into the service into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, a total of 4 times. And so the first time, as we already kind of seen, is with the incense offering. He goes in with a spoonful of ketoret or incense in his left hand and a pan of coals in his right hand. He places the pan on the floor between the poles in front of the Ark of the Covenant. Then he transfers the incense from the spoon into his two hands, and then he pours the incense from his hands onto the coals. And the smoke then will go up from the pan and go up to the ceiling and fill the Holy of Holies. The second time he goes in, he sprinkles the blood of the bull and offers as a sin offering, and he sprinkles that 8 times before the ark. And the third time is when he brings in the blood of the goat for Yah, sprinkled 8 times before. Then I have a slide error here because I put Dixie's picture over the top of the wrong slide here. But it says basically then he goes in and retrieves the pan that he had of the for the incense is the 4th time. Goes in separately to retrieve the pan, because that is my last slide.
Funny looking goat.
Funny looking goat is a canine goat. Okay. So that is the short midrash I have for our 16 of that. So, what questions do you have, sir? Gentlemen. Goats. Well, if that's it, then let's pray and we'll close. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, thank you for allowing us to read your word today, to midrash on your word. Thank you for the blessings of living in freedom that allows us to meet and discuss your word freely, out loud, and we thank you for it. In Yeshua's name, amen.